If you want to get better at communicating in English, you need to work on these 5 things. Let's talk about it. Hey up, mate, and cheers for finding this video today. I appreciate that. Now, if you're new around here, my name is Dan. I'm a British English teacher, and I'm here to help you feel more confident when communicating in English. Now, today, we're going to be talking all about the 5 things that you really need to work on if you want to communicate more effectively in English. And some people might disagree with what I'm about to tell you, but I learned this stuff through experience, and I want to share it with you today. So let's jump in. I strongly believe if you want to communicate with people that you meet in a language that you're learning, especially if you move to the UK, there are 5 key skills that you need to develop to communicate effectively with somebody. Now, if you can learn these 5 things, everything gets easier. Absolutely everything becomes more manageable, and everything, you'll just enjoy it a lot more, to be absolutely honest with you. So there are 5 key skills, right? I call them the 5 C's. You know, this is the BritSpeak 5C method, or, whatever you want to call it, right? So let me run through what the 5 C's are, first of all. The first C stands for connection. Now, when I say connection, what I mean is like truly engaging with other people, right? Like building a relationship with somebody, like really understanding and empathizing with that person. Because without connecting to people, communication feels like mechanical. It feels like talking to ChatGPT or something. And it's awkward, isn't it? And it also makes it really hard to make friends and build relationships and actually feel understood without connection. So connection is one thing that you're definitely going to need. The next C stands for clarity. Like, it's the importance of expressing ideas clearly and directly, yeah? Now, without clarity, it's just a bunch of information thrown at somebody and be like, good luck, mate, you work out what I'm trying to say. And, it means your message is probably going to get misunderstood or ignored, and you get miscommunication, and that's frustrating and it hurts your confidence. So we don't want any of that. So clarity is proper important. Now, the next one is a bit of a cheat, but it stands for clear pronunciation, because P doesn't start with C. So pronunciation doesn't start with C. So we put clear at the beginning, and now we've got one of the 5 C's. All right. So clear pronunciation. Obviously, if your vocabulary and grammar is really good, but nobody can understand the words you're saying because you can't pronounce them very well, that seems like a bad idea, mate. So without clear pronunciation, others are going to not understand what you're trying to say, and that's not going to be good, basically. So when it comes to English, we've got sounds that probably don't exist in your language or are difficult for you to pronounce. And if you don't get that sort of stuff right, communication is going to be a bit of a nightmare, mate. So, think about it. Next, we've got context. Context. This is like adapting the communication style to fit the situation that you're in, and the people that you're talking to at that time, right? Without understanding the context, you're going to maybe be way too formal in a casual situation, which is a common thing that English learners do. Or maybe you'll seem really impolite because you should be more formal and you're really casual. Like, you want to avoid these kind of misunderstandings. So understanding the context of the conversation and the communication that you're trying is really important. And the last one, the hardest one to find, to be honest, is confidence. Now, it's the foundation for communication, basically. Without confidence, you're not going to communicate very well. And even if you've got the best skills, if you've got zero confidence, it's not going to come across. And the self-doubt and the putting yourself down is going to stop you from expressing yourself fully. And those are the 5 C's of communication. These are the 5 things that you need to work on if you want to communicate with people in English. Now, that's all well and good. We kind of know what they are and why they're important, but, great. Now what? Well, I'm going to give you a few tips for each one, okay? So When it comes to connection, there are a few things that you need to do. You need to practice active listening. And when I say active listening, I don't mean listening to try and catch all the words that they say. We're not trying to focus on the understanding, on the meaning of the words. We're trying to understand what the person is trying to say. That's not the same thing. It's not a listening test. It's a connection to a person. I want to understand what they're saying and why they're saying it. I want to show an interest in what they're trying to say. So, don't interrupt people, focus on the message that they're trying to say, and maybe you can, double check, like, do you mean this kind of thing? Whatever it is. So that's really important. Another thing that you can do to build better connection is learn conversation starters. So learn some very simple expressions that you can use in a lot of different situations. For example, when I was learning Japanese, I often learned like, what did you do this week? As a way to start a conversation with people. Or how was your weekend? Or what do you think about this recent event that's just happened? Whatever it is, some kind of basic questions that you are really versatile and kind of make sure you've mastered them. So you can always pull them out in a conversation and it'll help you understand what that other person thinks or feels, right? Another thing you can start doing is observing non-verbal cues, right? Especially in the UK, the words that we say don't necessarily match the meaning we're trying to deliver. The way we say it, the body language, the facial expressions, all of that stuff carries a lot of weight in British English. So start paying attention to non-verbal cues, like understand their body language a bit or their facial expressions and try to understand the way they're reacting to things. All that stuff is going to help you get the message, right? And it's going to help you understand where they're coming from. One thing you can do is mirroring. So mirroring is basically kind of adapting your communication style to match the other person, like you're a mirror for them. So, you've got the similar tone, you're speaking at a similar level of formality, maybe casual or formal, and you're using similar pace and vocabulary, and that's going to help you connect because you're showing that you've got a lot in common, right? Naturally, people do this. If somebody is really happy, you're going to act happy around them, right? And this is a form of mirroring, and it's something you can practice doing. And like I said earlier, focus on the meaning, not the language. It's not a listening test, mate. We're not here to give you a perfect score because you caught all the right words. Understand what the person means and what they're trying to express, not the words that they're using, right? Cool. So connection. Those are some things that you can work on. The next one is clarity. So first up, simplify your sentences. I work with loads of people that try and get too fancy. They try using really academic English and really complex grammar. Excuse me, good sir, is there any chance that you would partake in a brown, warm cup of caffeinated beverage? You what, mate? Oh, would you like a cup of coffee? Well, why don't you just say that? Like nobody does that. What are you doing? So yeah, people seem to think that complex equals better. Native speakers don't do that. Exactly. If I were going to offer somebody a cup of coffee, I'd just be like, coffee? I wouldn't bother with anything else. Coffee, mate. And yeah, it's kind of weird. I still am working with a student called Wojtek from Poland. And he had this problem. He would try and make everything really complex and really advanced. Till one day I was like, mate, why are you doing that? Like, natives don't do that. Why don't you just simplify it a bit? And then that was probably like the biggest turning point for him because he was like, oh, okay. And then he got so much better at communicating because he didn't have to put pressure on himself to find the perfect and best possible way to say it. We just communicated and it made a big difference. Another thing you can do is when somebody tells you something and you're not sure you understand, paraphrase it back to them. Like if they tell you something, you're like, just to check, do you mean, and then say what you think they mean, right? So paraphrasing to check that you understand something, really important. Next, try and organize your thoughts before speaking. Like a lot of people in a conversation, you don't really have that much time to think, but you need to at least try and organize the next sentence you say before you say it. So it's not just throwing random words at people and hoping that they understand. There's a few techniques you can learn, like the 5W1H or the PREP methods. Really good for helping you organize your thoughts. Also, don't use jargon. Don't use like crazy vocabulary that only people who studied that thing would know, unless it can be helped, right? Use plain, everyday English. I promise you, no one will be impressed if you use weird words, especially if you use them in the wrong way. You know, like I see all these like Instagrammers and they're like basic English versus advanced English. And they always give you advanced words that make no sense in the context and no native speaker would ever say that. Instead of good, why don't you say exquisite? Nobody fucking says that, mate. That's why. And it's, yeah, like a big thing for me. I really hate that. Just keep it simple, mate, and you can't go wrong. And focus on delivering the message. Perfect grammar and the exact right word for every single situation is nice, but you can do a lot with bad grammar and basic vocabulary. You can go a long way with bad grammar and vocabulary that, you know, doesn't get you so far. You can do a lot with that, to be honest. So focus on delivering the message, not perfection, yeah? Good. Now we're on to everybody's favorite, pronunciation. And notice I didn't say accent. There's a big difference between pronunciation and accent. We're not talking about accent. Accents are part of your identity. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is clear pronunciation. So if you want to do that, there's a few things you can do. Shadowing. I'm a big fan of shadowing. Now, I did a full episode on shadowing before, but basically it's listening to some audio of a native speaker, pausing it and trying to copy it. And you mimic native speakers and the intonation patterns they use and the stress and that kind of stuff. So shadowing helps you mimic native speakers and sound more natural. You also need to work on basic sound production. You know, there'll be specific sounds in English that don't exist in your language or they work differently. And for example, TH is one that a lot of people struggle with. You know, this, those, three, these kind of words. People struggle with that TH sound sometimes. Plenty of native speakers do, to be fair. But, you know, if that's a problem for you, you need to work on it. Or the schwa sound. In British English, we've got the like mother, brother, the banana, London, all these words, right? So if you're not good at that, practice it. The next thing, I often tell people to record yourself speaking and listen back to it. If you're doing some speaking practice or pronunciation practice or whatever it is, you need to make sure that you're recording yourself and then listen back to it. And I know everybody's like, but Dan, I don't like my own voice. Nobody does. But if you want to get better, listening to your own voice is a good way to realize where your weak points are. Because the first time you listen back to your voice, you're always a bit like, is that how I actually sound? Is that what other people hear? But it's a bit of a shock. But eventually you'll start to be able to pick out your own weaknesses and you can work on them. Another thing is pronunciation is more than just making the sounds correctly. It's also about things like stress and intonation. So, like where to go up, where to go down, where to emphasize words, where to weaken words. And this will help you understand like what native speakers do. So learn some stress patterns, learn some intonation patterns, learn the basics so you can start to apply it to your own communication, right? And another thing, a bit more advanced, is practice things like chunking and rhythm. Now, English is a stress-based language. Now, a lot of languages like Japanese is like this, it's syllable-based language. Each sound has got equal emphasis. Like arigato, arigato. Like everything's equal. Not exactly like, but you know, generally. So it's a syllable-based language and syllable timing is very important in Japanese. English is not. We're a stress-based language. There's a rhythm to the language. So if you notice when I'm speaking, it almost always falls on the rhythm of the beat. And this is really important to sound natural in English. So work out where we're pushing words together and linking sounds and where the stress is falling in the rhythm. These are all things that you can learn. So if you want to communicate, and have clear pronunciation, these are things that you can work on. Next, context is a big one. In my experience, most people are way too formal. They learn like in classroom English, textbook English, and it's too formal. So, we've got to learn some context. So you've got to learn to adapt to the situation. And the way I would do this is learn how to express yourself in two different ways, formal and casual. So you've got both versions ready depending on the situation. Understand British cultural norms. As British people, we're very, very indirect. We don't really say exactly what we mean, especially when we're giving bad news or something like that. We're a bit weird with small talk. We almost always start talking about the weather, which is also a bit strange, And we're very sarcastic. We love dry, dark humor. And if you don't know these things about British people, it can be hard to actually communicate with us. So it's something to probably pay a bit more attention to. Understanding colloquial terms is another thing. Colloquial, I kind of mean like stuff that's exclusive to that dialect. So this is going to be things like slang and idioms and these weird British expressions that we use that now a lot of people tell me like, I don't want to learn slang. I don't understand slang. I don't want to learn slang. Right? Great. You don't want to learn it. Nobody's making you use it. If you don't want to use slang, that's up to you. But we're gonna. And if you want to understand us, you're probably going to have to spend a bit of time learning some of these words. So the good news for that is, by the way, I've got a free guide you can download. It's 50 of the most essential British expressions. It's totally free. It's called British English Made Easy. The link is in the description. You can download it now, so check it out and start learning some colloquial British English, yeah? Now, you could also practice role plays. You could practice doing things like ordering food at McDonald's and then ordering food at the Savoy. They're not the same thing. Or practice talking to your mate in the pub, or practice talking to a colleague in a meeting. Practice this kind of stuff. And we need to kind of address the elephant in the room, accents and dialects. Now, in the UK, whether you like it or not, there are at least 50 accents and probably just as many dialects where they say things in different ways, they pronounce things in different ways, they use different words. And if you expect everybody in the UK to sound the same and you move there, mate, you're going to have a very bad time. If you go to Sheffield and think everybody's going to sound like they're on the BBC, you've got no chance. So spend some time, especially if you're going to live in the UK, spend some time learning the accent where you're going to be. That's one thing you can do. And the last one, the most difficult one, confidence. So the way I approach confidence is set small goals. Like if your goal is to be fluent, that's a shit goal. It's not going to work. So set small goals. Maybe this week I'm going to greet at least one stranger. You're dropping your kids off at school and you say to one of the other parents, good morning, how are you today? That's it. That's your goal for this week. So set very small goals that incrementally get harder, right? Prepare for conversations before you have them. Think about the most common conversations that you have in your own life. What did you do last weekend? All that kind of stuff. And then prepare some key phrases in advance that you've already kind of worked out. That's what I did in Japanese. I understood roughly what people were going to ask me, and I just had stuff already prepared that I could tell them. Great. Nice. And when that happens and you're able to have a basic conversation, celebrate. Now, British people are very bloody negative. We're very pessimistic people usually. So it's easy to focus on the negatives. So no, sack that. Make sure you celebrate every small win, because every small win is a step in the right direction, and that's confidence. You need to also change your mindset. Like, I used to think, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I don't know anything. That's no good. What you need to focus on is not what you don't know. Focus on what you can do in the language. Okay, I don't know everything, but I can go to the shop and I can talk to the staff member to ask them if they've got a different color. Cool. That's good. Focus on that. Focus on the positives. And a big one is consistent daily practice. You really, really need consistent daily practice, especially speaking. I think you've got to really practice speaking if you want to build your confidence, because it's the hardest thing to do. And I think it's the one thing that people struggle with. And now it's over to you. Which of these skills do you think you need to practice the most this year? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And while you're at it, why don't you check out the link for BritSpeak Mates, my brand new school community. It's available for $19 a month. And it'll give you access to the group where you can connect with other speakers just like you, get live on-demand lessons. You'll also get access to me to ask questions and get feedback from daily speaking exercises. Check it out. And if you're kind of struggling with your pronunciation, why don't you check out this video next?